Hello and welcome to the Fellowship Phase, an Adventures in Middle-earth podcast. I'm Josh and that's Callum. We're going to give you inside information into finding your own path through Tolkien's world.
Nice. Frodo did not speak, and so Sam struggled on as best he could, having no guidance, but the will to climb as high as he might before his strength gave out and his will broke. On he toiled, up and up, turning this way and that to lessen the slope, often stumbling forward, and at the last crawling like a snail with a heavy burden on its back. When his will could drive him no further, and his limbs gave way, he stopped and laid his master gently down.
Hello, Callum.
Hello, Josh.
How are you?
I'm exhausted.
I was going to say exactly the same. So this episode is going to be about exhaustion. It's a topic that we've talked about before and we've touched on in the podcast, and it's one of the big differences between the basic rules which underpin the game and what they've done with Adventures in Middle-earth. And it's come up a lot in our game, and if you play, I imagine it's come up a lot in yours. We've certainly learned some lessons, and we wanted to talk through those. So, shall we start with what the rules are?
Yes, yeah, you may have experienced exhaustion in real life. Most people have at some point or the other. And just like in real life, in the game, there are different levels of exhaustion. So sometimes you might think, I feel exhausted, and other times you might think, I feel exhausted.
And that would be a second level of exhausted?
Yeah, I think. I don't know if I've certainly never experienced level 6 of exhaustion. I think there was one time that I got to level 3.
Yeah.
Definitely.
4 would be severe. That's hospitalisation.
Yeah. Well, is it? I don't know. I felt I was a student. I was trying to get home from a night shift, and I was walking along a road in Glasgow, and it was like 6 a.m, and I'd been up for more than 24 hours, and I just remember thinking, I just have to lie down. I'm just going to lie down on the street here and fall asleep. There was another time after a night shift that I was so exhausted I fell asleep cycling, which I've never done before.
That's close to sick. That's close to level 6. Death.
Yeah. Thankfully, it was not on a road, but I woke up as I was sort of like careering off the cycle path. I was like, "Well, this is not good."
Well, whether you've experienced that level of exhaustion or not, we've all experienced tiredness in some form, and the game goes to some lengths to explain what impact exhaustion will have, what the condition will have. It's laid out in a table, and there are different levels. So they go from level 1 to 6, 6th being the worst level. We start at level 1, you get disadvantage on ability checks. At level 2, you get disadvantage on ability checks, and your speed is halved. And the things start to stack up. Level 3, disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. Level 4, hit point maximum is halved. Level 5, your speed is reduced to 0. And level 6, death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Actually, you know that I didn't play in this game, but I know that some of the people in our party were playing Radiant Citadel recently, and I believe there was some sort of creature or I don't actually know the specifics of it, or a curse that happened to one of the player characters, and it caused continual exhaustion gain unless you passed a save, and one of the player characters just died because of exhaustion.
What a horrifying way to go.
Yeah, I don't think it was very narratively satisfying for them. It actually does say that in the Adventures in Middle-earth Lore Master's Guide. It says that it's important... actual death by exhaustion can be a deeply unsatisfying end for a hero, which I think is fair.
Yeah, it's fair. But it is important, and I like that it gives you decisions to make, because often there are things that are happening and the players are aware that they risk exhaustion if they keep pushing on or try this difficult thing, or, for instance, in a chase. We've talked about this, how rules as written chase rules would give you exhaustion and how overpowered that would be in Adventures Middle-earth. I like the exhaustion rules. They give the players choice, knowing they risk something bad happening. Now, in Core 5th Edition and in Adventures Middle-earth, to get rid of a level of exhaustion, you need to take a long rest, which in the base game is basically a night's sleep. One of the huge differences, because Adventures Middle-earth is a much more of a grind of a game. A long rest is not simply a night of sleep. It's a much longer period of downtime and rest, really, in a very safe place. In other words, it's much harder to get rid of exhaustion in Adventures Middle-earth than it is in 5th edition. And there are far more things in Adventures Middle-earth that actively give you exhaustion than there are in the base game. Because so much of it is about journeying and energy and basically pushing yourself to the limit without magic. So,
how does it feel as a player character when you were given levels of exhaustion, like a gift?
Yes, it was quite a gift that you gave us. Halmir has been exhausted a surprising number of times. He actually has a very high con because he's a soldier. And just the things he was doing, we've had journey events, and I think there was one time we encountered a spirit which led to the point of exhaustion. I think it's really interesting when it happens in the middle of a really big journey, when the stakes are known to the players. So there's one time when we had to travel quite a long way from Lake Town, that place whose name we've yet to understand, but the episode will follow at some point, all the way into Mirkwood, but much further south. And we knew we then had to return. And Halmir got, I think, 2 points of exhaustion on the way. And it was really important because at 2 points of exhaustion, not only was I rolling at disadvantage for ability checks, which make things very challenging, but if you're in a group, like, basically what happens is other people end up doing the bulk of the tasks. At level 2 of exhaustion, your speed is halved. And the group no longer is particularly helpful with that, because if the rest of the group do things, that means they just keep going at full speed and you're at half speed. So what effectively happened was Halmir slowed the whole party down when we actually had quite an urgency where to go. And it really then had us asking questions like, is there a way that we can get a boat on the river? Can we get horses? It forced us to change our plan. So I actually really enjoyed it, but then I quite like it when things go wrong in role-playing games.
Yeah. I think you're right. There's a lot of different ways in which it can be given out, and it can have a huge impact on the game when you're starting to roll things at disadvantage. A good example is stealth checks. So, if you're trying to sneak in somewhere and you become exhausted, it's really difficult. And I think the other, maybe we should talk about ways in which you can get exhaustion. I think one of the main ways is that if you, just like in real life, if you stay up too long, if you don't sleep, then you can get exhaustion. And there's rules for that in Dungeons Master's Guide about how you get exhaustion for not resting properly. And I think we'll do another episode where we'll talk about resting in Adventures in Middle-earth, and we'll talk about the mechanics around exhaustion gain if you don't take adequate sleep as opposed to rest in Adventures in Middle-earth. What other ways can you get exhaustion in Adventures in Middle-earth?
There are journey events, are there not, that quite specifically give you exhaustion or can counteract having exhaustion, and those are kind of narrative. We've had a couple of those. They're things that come up, I feel, quite often, and they're really like baked into the core mechanic of the game, which is journeying places.
Yeah, I think a lot of the journey events, Josh hasn't really seen these before because it's behind the screen. So there's basically like underlying the journey events. A lot of the books have like different flavors for them or different like ideas or suggestions. But essentially the numbers 1 to 12, each number has like a set mechanical thing. And often it's like, if you all succeed and do well, then something good might happen. Or if your embarkation roll was good, then it might be a positive event. But conversely, if the initial check is failed or the embarkation roll was negative, and then something bad will probably happen. So, for example, one of them relates to seeing something wondrous, and your check there, if you succeed, may allow you to regain a level of exhaustion. If you fail, then you might have a penalty to your arrival roll. And the exact mechanics don't really work, but I think what's worth thinking about is that a lot of the different events can remove or add exhaustion. So, for example, another one of the journey events is around hunting. And the way that you resolve that is a sort of a wisdom survival check. That might be made of advantage or disadvantage depending on different factors. If you succeed by a large amount, then everyone recovers exhaustion because you've got some fresh meat or food, and you also get more to the arrival roll because the journey was less punishing. If you just succeed, you might only get a level of exhaustion recovered. If you fail, then everyone gains a level of exhaustion. So it's extremely swingy.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about that sometimes. How do you feel about the journey events? Because they're part of the game that I haven't really adjusted. I've just left them as they are. How do they feel? Because I've got my thoughts, but I'm interested to hear what you think.
I like them. Now, I've never run a game, and I've never really seen them written down. I've only experienced them as a player. I like them because it makes journeys difficult, which I think is the point of the game.
Yeah.
In some role-playing games, you can very much just abstract out and just have almost like a cutscene of and you travel along this road, and you skip ahead to whatever happens at the other end of the road. Whereas in Tolkien's work and the game, the actual travelling makes up probably the bulk of the game, really. Mm. And I think it's good that there are a variety of things that can happen and that they do have consequences. I don't mind that sometimes it's quite punishing, because I think it keeps the players making decisions like, do we actually press on? Like, if you set off on a long journey to cross Mirkwood or to cross the Misty Mountains, not completing the journey should be an option.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be that could be the failure. I don't think it should just be a given that you'll get there. And if it is a given that you get there, why are we spending so long doing the journey?
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually think things like picking up exhaustion and potentially your speed getting halved, or you become so bad in combat that you think, it's not worth risking this, we should turn back. I like it.
I think there's only one time that you've done that. You were travelling into Mirkwood, I can't remember exactly why, and you had to turn back.
Yeah.
And then you gave it another go later in the year.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And I'm wondering, how did that feel that time?
It was demoralising, I suppose, because it felt like we'd failed. But again, it presented new choices. I think it meant the plot took a different direction. And something I like is, whilst the journey events are randomised, they're affected by dice roll. There are things as players you can do to prep. So there are items you can take, or there are virtues you can take, or there are people you can speak to. And I think we learned that lesson that actually, if we're going on a big journey, we should prepare. Which again, I think is rewarding what you want.
Yeah.
So an example would be a Bjorning culture of virtue, which Theodric had, was twice-baked honey cakes.
Delicious.
Which he made. It was a hobby of his. And with the cultural virtue, what it meant was the party ignored the first level of exhaustion they received on a journey. And that was the idea. They had these really nutritious, wholesome food with them that he would share around, and it would make journeying easier. Another example is if you have ponies or horses as part of your group on a journey, you ignore the first level of exhaustion that you receive. So again, it encourages you to prep in some way, or it rewards players who...
Yeah, so you just get a pony and then you fill its saddlebags of honey cakes. That's how you should travel.
Profit. You're there. Another example, which I saw when I was creating Halmir, was... I think it's over many leagues. Men of Minas Tirith can ignore the first level of exhaustion. So that's quite a common buff that exists, and it's quite a common penalty that exists in the journey rolls, exhaustion. So it does move up and down a lot more.
It's funny, it's not something... when you read rules, and I think, I find this a lot when we're creating characters. So I was recently creating a new 5th edition character, and there's sometimes just rules you read and you're like, that seems really exciting. And there's other rules that you read and you think, it's a bit boring. But then when you get into the game, and something in AiME in particular is that, the not very exciting rules can sometimes be really impactful. So that one about, if Halmir had the ignore exhaustion, that would have had a huge impact. Like, I think the other rules that you've chosen have had huge impacts as well. But it is something that is actually really powerful in this game. And if you're playing this for the first time and you've never experienced, I think it's worth knowing that exhaustion is such a big part of the game. So if there's ever anything that's like talking about as a mechanic, you're not like, well, that never comes up when I played normal D&D. So
it comes up a lot.
It comes up a lot in this.
And I actually think the point we really noticed it was when Theodric retired, because up until that point, because his virtue applied to the whole party ignored the first level of exhaustion. He then went away, and suddenly, every time people were rolling or making con saves or journey events came up, it was like, oh, actually, there's this new risk that we didn't have initially because we just had this buff from the beginning of the game.
You had a lot of buffs, and actually, I think you, when you accidentally, because we didn't know what we were doing, the party was quite well adapted for travelling.
Yes.
Because you had a wanderer with a lot of known lands where you were adventuring. You had someone who's really good at a lot of skill checks. You had a lot of healing, and you had exhaustion ignoring mechanics. So, it was pretty good. And I think that maybe the parallel here is that, like, in 5th edition, right, so essentially the day is, they give it recommendations about, like, each day, you take a long rest a day, potentially, maybe take 1, maybe 2 short rests, and it's something like, is it something like 5 encounters
between
a day?
5 and 8 encounters.
Yeah, so they recommend a lot of encounters, and I think Matt Mercer does this really well, Critical Role. Like, you quite often, like, they're going along, they roll an event, they have a small combat, and I think everyone knows, like, they're never going to lose the combat. But what that's there to do is to drain resources. We talk about that, like you drain resources. And the main resource in 5th edition is your hit points. Now, because Adventures in Middle-earth is a 5th edition port of the One Ring role-playing game, and the One Ring role-playing game is really not about combat, it's not about hit points.
Yeah.
Even when you level up, it's not like you suddenly become, like, you don't have a huge big bag of hit points. It's so much about the journey. When they put that across to 5th edition, you get this big bag of hit points, but I think the exhaustion mechanics are a big part of the draining of the resources. It's very unlikely you're actually just going to, like, lose in a combat, although we kind of play it a bit like that. I think it's much more likely that you're going to fail the journey because you'll get exhausted.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it's a mechanic which, you're right, when I first created a character and even read the rules, didn't appreciate how much it's woven into everything and how often it comes up. And I think it's really strong, and I think it really plays to the theme of the game. And I would, if you're playing for the first time, I'd really lean into it. Make sure that you don't, like, when these rules come up, don't ignore them, don't fudge them, don't think, oh, that's a bit strong. Really lean into it.
Make the when you're running the game, I think focusing the journey events, and anytime people are going on a journey, I have the journey sheet, which you can get. It's on the back page of the character sheet, and that's probably one of the biggest things I do in prep differently. Is that, like, I'll write where are they going? I look at the routes. I think about what the different options are. I look at the journey events table, whether that's the one in the sort of base book, or, like, there's some other ones on the Mirkwood campaign. It's an optional one. I think in the different region guides they usually give you a different option other than the Ravanian region guide, because that's the basic one. And then I look through all the events, and I usually scribble down some notes. So, like, if they roll a 1, this is the sort of ideas. And I don't really prep the whole thing, but I just have it's quite hard on the spot to improvise and be like, oh my god, they've rolled like a 12, and that's going to be something that they meet that's important. So who's going to be around that might be important? That's pretty much as much prep as I do about it. But then, as a player, I guess it's thinking, how can we plan? And that's what talking about, Matt Colville and making the players do what you want them. Like, the game wants you as players, like they do in the books, is think about your journey, prepare for the journey in advance, and do everything that you can. Don't travel in winter, because traveling in winter is harder.
Yep.
Take Build a Pony, because Build a Pony is great, and we'll make the journey much easier. Take rations, take food, make short journeys to different places. The shorter the journey, the less journey events, the quicker you might be able to get a rest. Get sanctuaries, get allies. That's the game, really, in a nutshell. This is the core of the game, and the exhaustion mechanics underpin it all. Because without any risk of failure or things going wrong, then what's the point in having journey rules? Like, what's the point in doing that, like you say? Because if you're just like, oh, well, you do the journey and then some things happen on the way, it's not impactful. But if you're like, these things could potentially kill you,
Yeah.
then, well, okay, fair enough, we do have to prepare, and we do have to pay attention. And then suddenly it feels tense and exciting. I'm feeling much more awake now. I was exhausted at the beginning of this episode, but these honey cakes have been delicious.
Well, the 6 cups of coffee that I've had today have certainly helped me as well.
Yeah. And this pony over here.
Okay, so what have we learned? We've learned exhaustion is tiring and a vital part of Adventures Middle-earth. Probably more so than it is in other games. And it probably goes under the radar a bit about how much of a core mechanic it is if you're coming from a background of other role-playing games. It's pretty quiet in the book as well. It doesn't sort of start on page 1 like, exhaustion is massive, and maybe it should. Maybe it should just hammer that right up front.
Yeah, I don't know what page... It's on... it's in the Lore Master's Guide, and it's on page 52. It does say exhaustion plays a big part in Adventures in Middle-earth, more so than the core rules. But it doesn't come in until page 52, so that's difficult. But
maybe we're guilty of it as well. I mean, we're quite deep into the series of podcasts, and we've only kind of set aside time to talk about exhaustion specifically now.
Yeah, that's true. Well, watch out for exhaustion. Get your cakes, get your horses, and good luck. No emails except on party business. And comments, suggestions and questions to thefellowshipphase@gmail.com. The long year turns to its close. Much we have accomplished these last seasons. Our fellowship disbands, but is not broken, and we will return.
On the next episode of The Fellowship Phase.